Hi, and welcome to this edition of A Conversation With, and joining us in studio today, a regular now, an annual guest, Priscilla Matton. She is the Superintendent for the Bristol County Mosquito Control Commission, and she joins us here midsummer, a couple weeks earlier than last year, but we wanted to just talk about the mosquito season, the upcoming mosquito season, and it really is fascinating. You and I have been talking off camera, and we've been emailing each other for a little bit now, talking about this, and it's just another different year, and it's amazing how much 12 months versus 12 months, the patterns that develop and what have you. It is fascinating. Thanks for coming, first of all. I appreciate it. I know you're very busy right now, to say the least.
We always appreciate the opportunity to come in and speak about mosquitoes, so thank you very much.
I emailed her, and the first thing in the first line I wrote, I said, it's time to talk bugs. And she said, you're right, it is time to talk bugs. Let's talk at the start here. So it's 2021 as we tape the show. It's summer 2021. It's hot out. It's been a good summer for a lot of people. Although I know some people in different parts of the state are saying it's dry and it's certainly wetter than last year, but drier than a normal year. Overall assessment: how is the summer going, and from the fall, and what does that translate to the upcoming fall?
Sure. So it was an interesting winter and fall of last year, of 2020. Very dry, which means that some of our mosquitoes that are important for EEE had a little bit of trouble overwintering, because they overwinter right in those swamps, right in the standing water. And not a lot of water sometimes means not a lot of mosquitoes. So when we were looking at habitat in the fall, and then we actually do look for habitat in the winter, we were seeing low levels of water, we were seeing less mosquito larvae, so we were wondering how that was going to translate out into this year, into 2021, and what the mosquito season was going to bring. We got a lot of Eastern equine encephalitis EEE in 2019, right? So unprecedented, really scary year for all of us in Massachusetts. We were holding our breath for 2020. Most of the activity took place in Plymouth County. This would be the third year of a EEE cycle. What was going to happen?
Right.
So dry weather going into the spring was really great news for us, and kind of dry right at the beginning of the season, of the summer season. So we were seeing more mosquitoes that we would get for West Nile virus. Remember, just because I like to remind people, 53 different species of mosquitoes in Massachusetts.
Right.
So, not all of them transmit EEE, not all of them transmit West Nile virus. So we have to look at what we got and what we're collecting.
Talk a little bit, and I think we should probably, before we actually get into more details too, EEE, what is it? West Nile virus, what is it? And the differences?
Sure. So Eastern equine encephalitis EEE has been around in Massachusetts since the 1930s, and we continuously have outbreaks throughout the last 100 years. What we've seen, though, is sort of a change in pattern with the mosquitoes and where it's occurring in the state. So for our hot spots here in Massachusetts, certainly Plymouth and Bristol counties are the most active. 2019 is when we started to see it further out into what we would consider to be central Massachusetts, and in that area. So Eastern equine encephalitis first started in horses, but now there's a vaccine for horses, so much less cases. It involves basically a handful of mosquitoes, two primarily, that overwinter in the swamps, in the Hockomock Swamp, the Freetown, New Bedford, Bolton Cedar Swamp, the Acushnet Cedar Swamp, all these things that you have right on your border, right? And these are white cedar, red maple swamps that stay wet all year round. And what we were seeing is that EEE, unfortunately, in Massachusetts is very deadly. So in 19, there were 12 cases and 6 individuals passed away from it. So we have a really high mortality rate. And unfortunately, if you get EEE, which is an encephalitis, so a swelling of the brain, you end up usually with some permanent health effects after. So we want to try to reduce risk as much as we can. West Nile virus, though, different group of mosquitoes, different group of birds, different habitat, certainly more container species. West Nile virus came into the United States in 1999 and then into Massachusetts in 2000, 2001. So a totally different way that we have to conduct surveillance for these mosquitoes. These mosquitoes existed here before, but they were of no importance because they didn't play a role in Triple E. West Nile virus is still an encephalitis, but the mortality rate is significantly less. Many people get West Nile virus but have no symptoms. They don't even know that they've had it. Of those people that get it, less than 10% will get sick, enough for you to know that you have something, and then of that, less than 1% usually have significant impacts. You can, unfortunately, die from West Nile virus, but it's much rarer than it is for Triple E.
And you talked about sort of the environment that they need to produce mosquitoes. And again, sort of, let's delve into that a little bit, because you talked about the Hockomock Swamp, you talk about the Cedar Swamp. What is the environment that those mosquitoes need to thrive?
Well, because they overwinter in the larval stage, they need to have permanent water, and they need to be able to survive our cold winters, the snowpacks, the ice packs. So these swamps are great, and these trees actually have these root cavities. We call them crypts, and they can hide out underneath these crypts in these root cavities. They have a few natural predators in this habitat, but not as many. The cedar swamps tend to be more acidic, so we don't, it's not flowing water, so we don't have fish. There's no, activity from that kind of stuff. So it's a very specialized habitat that you can find, and it's just great for this mosquito. Another mosquito of importance is the cattail mosquito, right? And we see a lot of cattails around. You can find them just in regular swamps, but you can also find them in your retention-detention ponds that you might have, around a park or in a school facility or anything like that. And these mosquitoes are great because they overwinter as larvae, but they tap right into the root of that cattail and breathe through the plant. So they have really great protection, which makes it very, very difficult for us to control them. And because of that, it's that really unique habitat that makes both Bristol and Plymouth County so active in Triple E. Some other areas don't have these type of swamp complexes.
And it's funny because I was asking you, when we were talking before the show about the Cape, which theoretically is not that far away, but as you said, the environment isn't, it's not like they don't have it because there's no boundaries, but it's not conducive for mosquitoes.
Absolutely. So more sandy soil. They certainly have a few swamps, red maple, white cedar swamps, but not as much as here. And our swamps are significantly larger. I mean, the Hockomock Swamp Complex, which is both in Bristol and Plymouth County, up in the north region, so Easton, Bridgewater area. Our side of the swamp is over 2,500 acres. Wow. And the Bolton Cedar Swamp is, 800 acres, which is right on the New Bedford Freetown line. You have the Acushnet Cedar Swamp, which is a couple of hundred acres. There's just not the scope and size. And as these swamps mature, the trees fall down, they die, they make these better crypts. It just produces habitat. So it's really great. And unfortunately for us, it's very difficult to treat because you can't get into those crypts and you can't really get down into the muck where those mosquitoes are hiding. So Triple E becomes very difficult for us to control in the larval stage. And then unfortunately when it gets big enough that people and animals are getting impacted, sometimes the scope gets much, much bigger than it would be for some other.
So the cycle then that you talk about, and I know because the last couple of years we've talked about that, and the cycle begins, this is the third of a 3-year cycle. The cycles, what are they determined by? Is it the rain that you've talked about, or is it, the swamp situation, combination of everything?
Unfortunately, it's a combination of everything. So for one, populations of mosquitoes from the previous year. So what are our numbers like? Last year, even though it was 2020, we were collecting significantly less of the important mosquito, which we call Culicida melanura, but the cedar swamp mosquito, than we did in 19. This year, in 2020, because of the drought and the lack of rain that went into the fall, we're collecting even less. So we are where we would normally, in an average trap night, maybe collect 100 Culicida melanura, we're getting maybe 5. So certainly rain impacted them over the fall. So we look at rain in the previous year and in the fall time when they're going to use that habitat to overwinter, and then what is happening now. what's happening right now in July and August and September to help predict what's going to happen. And what we talk about is sort of the difference in rain events from, say, northern Bristol County to southern Bristol County.
And that's a good point, because you and I were talking about, and we just went through the numbers too. You look at the numbers, and this is from the airport, which is the official station, I guess, for New Bedford is the best way to describe it. So a normal year is like 27 inches of rain, and we've had 20. And I know people have said, oh, it's been a wet summer or a wet year, and you're sitting there going, we're 7 inches below a normal year, but we're 7 inches above where we were last year. So, and that's a pretty good disparity for 3 years, really, or not 3 years, but 2 years plus a normal year. That's a lot. But then you were talking about, I guess, off the Charles River, and how many mosquitoes they caught in one night. I mean, it's crazy, this disparity.
Exactly. So surveillance, right? So Massachusetts has a great surveillance system with our local mosquito control districts, as well as the Mass Department of Public Health. And, they're collecting 16,000 mosquitoes in a night from some of these floodwater events that they've seen from the different rain events, not just Elsa, but some of the other ones.
You're saying that's up in like Franklin County, right?
Yes. No, that was up in Norfolk County.
Norfolk, okay.
Yep. And then some in Plymouth County up towards the Bridgewaters, they were collecting 8,000. We're not collecting anything like that here. That's good, right, for nuisance or for people that are concerned about getting bit by mosquitoes. However, sometimes it makes it more difficult for us to detect disease because we're getting less samples, but it doesn't mean the disease is not out there.
Right.
So we need to make sure that, we're still protecting ourselves when we're going out. But we like to look for, with Tripoli, 3 sort of key things: rain events. What's the population in June? If we have a big population of melanora in June, that means we can get the cycle going, because the mosquitoes don't have Tripoli, the birds have Tripoli. So we look at Florida, Georgia, where the birds come up from the south.
Okay.
Yes, so Florida has year-round mosquitoes, right? Anybody who's been to Florida knows the birds get infected down there, and then they migrate up here, and that's when we start to see activity. So if you have a good population of mosquitoes up here, when those birds are coming back and they're positive, you can infect a lot of mosquitoes. Low populations in the early spring can help reduce the amplification cycle before it spills over to people. So it's really important. We look at rain, we look at the populations, and unfortunately the other thing is history, right? But what are we seeing? Just like you said with the rain events, we might be this much above last year, but with this much below historical. We have to start looking at what historical means, more and more.
And that's the other thing. We're talking with Priscilla Matton from the Bristol County Mosquito Control Commission here, and we talked about I know last year you really emphasized, because we were really worried after 2019. And I remember you emphasized, the cycle and this, but the weather wasn't conducive to help the cycle, really. So does that change the cycles?
Right.
And does that mean another 3-year cycle starts, I don't know, two years from now or something?
And we have seen that, right? So when we look back in the records, outbreaks in the 50s, in the 70s, in the 90s. So our history for Tripoli in Massachusetts was a 3-year cycle followed by about 15 to 17 years of no activity or very, very low activity.
Yeah, I remember saying, yeah.
Yep. 1990 to 2004 was the next break. But then we had 4, 5, and 6, 10, 12, 19, 20. So we're missing these large areas of no activity. So yeah, we have to continue to revamp, redecide what's important, what really are the criterias that makes it what we would consider to be a bad year. And it's different. It's not like it was back in the 90s, and it's not like what it was back in 2004. What is different? Is it rain events? Is it the way that the rain is moving through the county? Some areas are more significantly impacted than others. Populations, habitat, are we encroaching on these habitats a little bit more? Are we living closer to these swamps? Right. Putting people, in more exposure potentially. I also think this year, as we know, hot, right? Well,
and humid.
And you're not going outside.
Right.
I think that's the thing, right? We looked at the data. We're getting mosquitoes. It's not like we're not collecting mosquitoes, but our call volume for requests are down about 40%. And that's actually true almost across all the mosquito controls that take requests. And why is that? Well, sometimes it's raining so much you don't go outside, and then sometimes it's so hot you don't go outside.
Right.
So a lot of factors play into how we determine risk. Today looks like a gorgeous day. I bet you there'll be a lot of people out tonight because it's finally the humidity broke. And on those really nice summer nights where it's not too humid, you can get out of your air condition for a little while. That's when you're going to be exposed to mosquitoes.
And I think there's only been once that the city has said that they were doing ground spraying. I think that was in late last month that they had that. But other than that, they haven't had any ground spraying.
So we conduct ground spraying for the city parks here in New Bedford every Thursday morning, weather permitting. Yep. So it was more a blanket, like, hey, every Thursday morning, weather permitting, we'll be here to spray the parks and such. So that we do, and then we also take care of residential requests, and also when we get high populations of mosquitoes in our traps. We're still collecting, we're still testing through the Mass Department of Public Health for West Nile virus and Triple E. So, there might be additional spraying if necessary because of detection of a virus.
You said something which I wasn't even aware of, talking about drought and stuff like that, and you were saying to me that the Cape is in a drought right now, and it is creeping this way because it's true, the storms are missing our neck of the woods, and 30 miles up the road, you said what saying Taunton is right there.
Absolutely, and so that makes it a different habitat so I service all 20 towns within Bristol County. So what's happening in, Attleboro, Easton, and Taunton is certainly different than what can be happening in Freetown, New Bedford, Fairhaven. You have salt marshes, which, with rising sea levels and also tidal events are much different, in this area than they would be in some other areas. So it's very different. The county's very, very different. Lots of different habitat.
And the peak really comes in September because we've talked about that in the fall. I mean, this is when things are growing, for lack of a better word. And then in September, really September into October is when it really peaks. So talk a little bit about, obviously it might not be on people's minds right now, but I mean, they got to protect themselves. And I know that you've come in the past and you've had the different samples and what have you, but really it's just basic things that they have to do to take care of themselves and their family. Yes,
and thanks for remembering that, because what happens in September, kids go back to school, sports and events, our minds are not onto mosquitoes. At that point, we think it's over, and it's really not. So that's really important. The bulk of the mosquito diseases in Massachusetts happen in August and in September. That's when we get the cases. That's when people need to be looking. And yes, our season has expanded longer into October. We've had horse cases and human cases into October now. So we do need to be mindful into that first hard frost, which in some years happens around Thanksgiving.
Correct.
Yep. A hard frost is different than I got to kind of scrape my windows, right? So we have to keep that in mind. Personal protection is the best way to go. So I call it the 5 Ds of protection. So avoid activity at dusk and dawn when mosquitoes are most active, which of course is very hard because that's when we're home from work. So we want to be out.
When the sports are happening.
Exactly. Yep. Or the temperatures have finally gone down. So dress appropriately if you can. Long sleeves, long pants, loose-fitting clothes, light-colored clothes, all help. Again, very difficult when we're having 100% humidity. So use a personal repellent like DEET, picaretin, oil of lemon eucalyptus. There's many that are offered and recommended by the CDC or the Mass Department of Public Health. You can go to our website, the state's website, and find a list.
And people worry about those just by what they're made of.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's why, there are so many options. There are so many formulations. You don't need 100% DEET. You just need 20% DEET. You're going to be looking at about 4 hours of protection with 20% DEET. So if you're going camping, you're going to have to reapply. Think of it like a sunscreen, right? Unfortunately, that's it. If you're going to be outside, you're only going to be outside for a short period of time. Maybe try clothes, maybe try something different. If you're going to be sitting on your porch, we recommend a fan. They're good flyers, certainly, mosquitoes, but if you've got a breeze going, you can help keep them off of you when you're, sitting around the patio or something like that. So certainly with personal protection, there are so many different options, that the CDC recommends, and in different formulations and different ways to use it, from a wipe to a spray. So, try to find the one that you like best, that works best for you and your skin, and read the label. Always read the label. It'll tell you how to apply it, when to apply it, how long it's going to last, and that kind of stuff.
And I would imagine if you just, the different scenarios, if you're camping, you probably have to reapply, but if you're just going out for a soccer game, one application, a 2-hour game, is probably enough.
Absolutely.
To take care of yourself.
Absolutely. Yes. Yep.
And really focus on the young kids. Kids in high school are different, obviously, than the little ones that are out at night. You've got to really protect them and make sure that they're taken care of, because they're not thinking about that.
Of course. And we always joke, football games, in the fall, and we say, oh, those football players, yeah, they're all padded up. They got, it's the kids that are sitting in the stands watching their brother or sister do something. It's the parents sitting in the stands. It's you saying to your kid, hey, go on over there and play, on the swing set, or in the gym, in the, playground or something with your friends, or underneath the bleachers. Yeah, those are the people that we're worried about, the ones that are less likely to notice that there's mosquitoes around. That's also a good thing. I like to tell, they're like, well, I don't want to put repellent on. Okay, all right, well, I do this. I go and I sit on my porch. I live in Swansea. I sit on my porch, and then here comes a mosquito. Okay, maybe one, especially if I can catch her, maybe one, okay, but then I'm looking, like, we call it landing counts. Like, what's my landing count? How many are bothering you? Are you getting one in 10 minutes? Are you getting one every minute? Are you getting 5 in a minute? Right. There's places where that's certainly possible. Okay, well then let's go inside. Like if you don't want to do it, you go out after your shower, you don't want to put it on. Okay, well then let's be reasonable. Understanding that they can still sneak around,
right,
bite your ankles, you might not catch them all, but look around. If you're being bothered by mosquitoes, chances are whoever you're with or your kids are probably being bothered too.
And you always talk about precautions that you can take at home. That standing water's an issue.
Absolutely. Standing water around your house is great for what we call backyard biters, right? You got the water right there, you're sitting on your porch, they ain't going very far to feed, right? It's perfect. The buffet is right close.
Right.
So dump any standing water or clean out any standing water, you have around your house. So bird baths, dog kiddie pools, or a lot of us like to save water, right? Because we're concerned, we're trying to conserve. So it rains, we put out a bucket. We're going to use that bucket later to water our tomato plants,
mm-hmm,
or let's catch the condensation that comes off of our air conditioning or something. You want to be using that water pretty frequently. You don't want it to sit more than 3 to 5 days before you dump it out or use it. So it's very important to do that. Check the screens around your house. Make sure that your screens are properly sealed and there's no holes. That way your mosquitoes are not coming in when you're already in the house.
Right. What about, we've got a couple minutes left here. I just want to make sure people know where to go to look for these things. How about some website addresses for people to check out?
Sure.
You mentioned the CDC and you also mentioned the state.
Yes, absolutely. The Mass Department of Public Health. So it's all on mass.gov. Sometimes our websites are really, really long, so sometimes it's just easier to go to mass.gov and in the search bar, mosquitoes or Bristol County Mosquito Control or any of the other mosquito controls in the area, you can access a lot of information there. We have fact sheets. The state has fact sheets. There's also the state program, which is the State Reclamation and Mosquito Control Board, which is part of Mass Department of Agricultural Resources. CDC is a great place. There's a lot of areas where you can find some information and read up on it. And then, your local city boards of health or departments of health too can help provide information.
And the last thing too I want to emphasize to people too is, you're Bristol County, there's Plymouth County, and you talk about the relationship you have with them, but when people are going out and say they're going to visit friends in Attleboro or Plymouth or whatever, you got to take precautions no matter where, because as you were saying, there's different situations really right now in different regions of just Bristol County or Plymouth County or wherever. You've got to be smart where you're going.
Absolutely. It's very important just to take a look.
There's no boundaries for
There's
this.
no boundaries for mosquitoes. And, for us in Bristol, we also look at Rhode Island, right? Rhode Island's right there.
Yeah.
They have their sampling, what's going on there, because it could easily spread over into the towns that are along. What if you're traveling with your family or your kids to, another town for camping and you're going to be outside for a while? It's just always good to keep an eye on what's going on. And because of weather patterns or temperature patterns, things can be significantly different, like, where they collect 16,000 in one night,
Right.
You probably would be like, maybe I will bring a jacket.
Well, yeah, and I guess it's a good thing to have like the deed or whatever in your car or whatever, so when you're going to these different places, you are taking the precautions, because again, it's simple to say, well, that's the county, but there is no boundaries.
There is no boundaries. And it's true, too, because we always talk to, like, the Department of Conservation and Recreation, your parks, right? Well, you might go to your park, you might go to the bike path, and you'll see a sign that says, these things carry disease, Well, that's great, except I forgot my deed at home. And now I'm already on the bike path, or I'm already at the beach,
Right.
or I'm already going to walk, this trail or something. So yeah, just make it part of your, inside the car thing. You get your sunscreen, you got your DEET,
Right.
you got your water, you got all the things that you need, and then apply it if necessary.
Anybody has any questions for you? How can they get in touch with you?
Sure, so they can check us out at the Bristol County Mosquito Control website, which is on mass.gov. You can also call us at 508-823-5253. You can make a request there. You can tell us about standing water. If you have questions, you can just call the office. And you can also, reach me at that same number if you have any, specific questions about what's going on.
Good seeing you. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Patricia Matton, our guest, our annual guest here. Thanks for coming in. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
That's going to do it for this edition of A Conversation With. I'm Jim Marshall of the New Bedford Cable Network. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you again soon.